They said this conflict was impossible to escalate any further, yet here we are. With those dramatic words, an official broadcast out of Tehran late last night rattled the global community, leaving everyone questioning just how far Israel and Iran are prepared to push their latest showdown. Today, we dive deep into the rapidly unfolding standoff that has the Middle East, and indeed the world, on edge. Why did Israel declare it wields near-complete dominance in Iranian skies? How could Iran's missiles still slip through advanced air defenses? And what in the world does a last-minute veto by President Donald Trump have to do with this intensifying exchange? Buckle up, because we will unravel all those burning questions and more in this pulse-pounding report. Let us trace the sparks back to the very core of this confrontation. Israel claims to have launched its strongest aerial assault against Iranian facilities in decades, striking targets from Tehran to the Persian Gulf, while Tehran's top brass roars that they will retaliate until their occupied lands are freed, citing a range of disputed territories. Many experts are whispering about an unparalleled turning point. Is this just another exchange of cross-border fire, or does it mark the threshold of a more catastrophic conflict? In this episode, we will dissect the timeline of these new strikes and look at why the region's tension is at an all-time high. We will also examine eye-opening details, such as the shuttering of Israel's main international airport, the alleged attempt on Iran's supreme leader, and the real threat of nuclear escalation. Our focus begins with the trigger that has set both sides on high alert: a battery of Israeli strikes declared on Iranian soil over the last 3 days. According to the Israeli military, their jets have achieved something of a strategic breakthrough, operating with near impunity in the skies over key Iranian cities. Yet, contrary to those claims, Iranian missiles have found cracks in Israel's defensive umbrella, slipping through despite Israel's prized multi-tiered air defenses. Official statements from Iranian authorities say multiple ballistic rockets have indeed struck Israeli cities, leading to civilian and military casualties. But what is fueling the animosity to reach such a fever pitch now, when Israel and Iran have long been arch rivals? Iran's government says it is outraged by the repeated targeting of high-ranking security officials, including several top generals in the Revolutionary Guard, and states that vital nuclear scientists are being assassinated one by one. Meanwhile, Israel stands firm, branding these figures as linchpins in Tehran's nuclear weapons program. Tel Aviv justifies these relentless air raids as a proactive measure to neutralize perceived threats to Israel's fundamental security. The alleged message: the syndicated networks of Iranian ballistic missiles, advanced technologies, and possibly even nuclear capabilities must be contained. Yet, in a twist that has commentators buzzing worldwide, a United States official shared that President Donald Trump personally vetoed an Israeli plan to assassinate Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in recent days. The news struck like lightning, raising the question, just how close did we come to watching a fateful decapitation strike that could have plunged the region into chaos beyond measure? Even the notion that such an idea was floated reveals how volatile the moment is. On the Iranian side, the National Health Ministry states that over 220 people have been killed since the airstrikes began, with well over 1,000 wounded. Their officials allege that more than 90% of those casualties are civilians, a claim that Israel hotly disputes, pointing instead to the proliferation of underground missile sites in residential areas. Iranian state television lambastes Israel for hitting structures deeply symbolic to the Iranian identity, from oil refineries to defense research labs. And in one shocking twist, Iranian authorities are calling on local residents to take refuge in metro stations and mosques, prepared as bomb shelters to withstand further attacks. But the devastation is not confined to Iranian soil. Israel claims that Iranian missiles have hit apartment buildings near Tel Aviv and in northern regions such as Haifa. Civilians, including children, have lost their lives. The Magen David Adom Emergency Service reports an intense wave of injuries from the strikes. In some neighborhoods, the wail of sirens continues around the clock as panicked families rush for shelter. Meanwhile, Israel's main airport shuts down for a third consecutive day, paralyzing travel and spurring tourists and residents into frantic attempts to escape potential harm. Now, let us peel back the layers of what this means in the broader context. Ever since the Islamic Revolution decades ago, Iran and Israel have rarely seen eye to eye. Tensions have periodically flared, but this latest clash, pitting Israel's advanced jets and rumored nuclear arsenal against Iran's ballistic missile capabilities, feels alarming in its scope. The rhetorical escalation is enormous. Both sides threaten to ramp up attacks if the other side does not stand down. Israeli leaders vow that with each additional Iranian missile launched, the Israeli military will destroy even more Iranian facilities. In parallel, Iranian officials warn that if Israel keeps raining destruction onto Iranian towns and cities, they will retaliate against every occupied territory under Israel's control and beyond. And this stands against a complicated political backdrop. The United States canceled its most recent round of negotiations with Tehran over Iran's nuclear program, fueling accusations that Washington is tacitly giving Israel the green light. Nonetheless, President Trump denies involvement in these strikes, urging Iran to agree to a new nuclear deal to avoid further destruction, as he put it. This interplay spotlights how the White House is navigating a minefield. On one hand, they want to rein in Iran's nuclear ambitions. On the other, they shy away from sliding headlong into a full-scale war. But let us not forget the heart-wrenching personal stories behind these headlines. In Bat Yam, near Tel Aviv, 6 people, 2 of them children, ages 9 and 10, were killed when an Iranian missile flattened part of their apartment building. In the northern Arab town of Tamra, 4 people lost their lives to another missile strike. The images on local television showed piles of rubble, frantic rescue workers combing through debris, and families weeping as they searched for missing loved ones. Meanwhile, on the Iranian side, swirling clouds of smoke hover over Tehran's skyline as desperate civilians struggle to find medical care. One especially grim photograph lingers in the public mind: a father in a blood-stained shirt carrying a badly injured young girl down a street littered with concrete shards. The local press is rife with stories of volunteers pitching in to deliver first aid, brandishing tattered bandages and homemade tourniquets. Iran's military networks are also urging people to remain vigilant, claiming that further Israeli assaults could knock out key infrastructure, such as the capital's electricity grid or water supply. Curiously, the conflict has also triggered a wave of cyber warfare. Unofficial reports from technology experts hint that Iranian hackers are targeting Israeli government websites, while Israel's cyber directorate warns that malicious elements could try to hijack crucial civilian systems, from hospital databases to traffic management networks. This digital dimension of modern warfare adds yet another layer of chaos, underscoring how the lines between battlefield and home front have blurred extensively in recent years. One factor overshadowing all of this is Iran's nuclear program. Israel has long contested Iran's claims that it pursues only peaceful nuclear energy and medical research. At the same time, Tehran sees Israel's undeclared nuclear arsenal as an unacceptable security threat. The strike on the Natanz enrichment facility was apparently so damaging that even the United Nations watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, signaled concern over potential radiation hazards. Israel's official statement, however, insists that they targeted only above-ground components, taking special care to avoid releasing contaminants. Iranian engineers now scramble to restore power lines, claiming the underground centrifuges remain intact, though officials acknowledge that above-ground networks crucial for distribution of electricity have been decimated. According to a senior Israeli officer, the nuclear program may take many months, if not longer, to bounce back to full capacity. Yet, that is not the only nuclear-related site in question. The city of Isfahan, home to a major uranium conversion facility, has suffered extensive bomb damage, highlighting how central Iran's nuclear installations are to Israel's entire mission. According to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the campaign is designed to obstruct what he views as Tehran's dangerous march toward a nuclear weapon. But critics around the globe, ranging from human rights organizations to security analysts, voice alarm that these strikes risk a meltdown or other radiological disasters, not to mention the human toll. And if that were not enough, there is the overshadowing presence of other conflicts in the Middle East. Israel is still reeling from an ongoing confrontation in the Gaza Strip, where Iranian-backed Hamas militants staged a horrifying attack on Israeli territory not long ago. This multi-front dynamic means that Israel's attention is divided, while Iran might attempt to exploit vulnerabilities. Meanwhile, other regional players watch anxiously, worried about a spillover effect that could ignite a broader conflagration. Some nations attempt last-ditch diplomatic interventions, calling for immediate cessation of hostilities, but these pleas have thus far landed on deaf ears. For anyone intrigued by the complexities of geopolitics, here is our first friendly reminder. If this in-depth look at a high-stakes, fast-evolving crisis has you on the edge of your seat, please consider showing a bit of support by clicking the like button. Your engagement helps ensure we can continue bringing you comprehensive deep dives into pivotal global stories. Now, let us talk more about the internal response within Iran. As the paramilitary Revolutionary Guard counts the loss of high-profile generals, ordinary citizens are furious and frightened. State media anchors, their voices quivering with indignation, lament that these are national heroes who dedicated their lives to the sovereignty of the republic. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, a controversial figure in his own right, lambastes the international community for ignoring what he dubs a violation of all laws and moral principles, as men in uniform vow that Israel must be punished. Tehran's mayor even appeared on television to provide updates on efforts to keep the metro system operational as a vital fallback for civilians seeking shelter. The metro has rarely faced conditions this severe. The city's hospitals, too, are under extraordinary pressure, with staff working in shifts around the clock. Makeshift triage centers sprang up in underground parking garages, illuminated only by the flicker of backup generators. Volunteers stream in from the countryside to donate food and medical supplies, but the scale of injuries is daunting. In Israel, nervous tensions grip many communities, especially those that have already tasted Iranian missiles in the last 72 hours. Surviving relatives speak of nightmares, of children jolted awake by sirens, imagining flames and rubble. At times, the entire country seems to hold its breath, uncertain if the next wave of rockets will breach the nation's sophisticated Iron Dome and other layered defense systems. Yet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu remains notably resolute on national television, telling foreign reporters Israel will persist in what he calls preemptive self-defense. He alludes to intelligence that supposedly indicates Iran's leadership is determined to acquire nuclear arms and even to funnel these weapons to proxy groups scattered throughout the Middle East. Netanyahu mentions Yemen's Houthi rebels by name, implying that Iran was poised to hand them unprecedented capabilities. With so many crises happening in quick succession, the general mood in the streets is uneasy, as citizens wonder if Netanyahu has made a fateful choice that cannot be reversed. Iran's ballistic missile arsenal, though battered, should not be underestimated either. Satellite images confirm that, while Israeli jets effectively crippled some launch sites, a few mobile units remain intact, capable of delivering short and medium-range warheads to Israeli population centers. Tensions are further stoked by an online rumor mill. Some claim Iran has given an ultimatum to Israel. Others hint that Iran may strike American assets in the region if the United States is found complicit in Israeli actions. Meanwhile, analysts debate the broader significance of these swirling events. Some see them as a tactical push by Netanyahu to reassert Israel's regional dominance and draw attention away from the ongoing turmoil with Hamas. Others hypothesize that Iran's leadership, seething with anger over crippling international sanctions, decided the time was ripe to test Israel's readiness. In any event, the atmosphere sizzles with unpredictability. Washington stands as a central figure in the background of this rapidly evolving drama. President Trump's revelation that he vetoed an Israeli plan to kill Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is a bombshell. Though critics doubt the exact claim, many believe that some form of high-level covert operation was indeed on the table. The question remains, could the region be just a hair's breadth away from an irreversible point of no return? The White House insists that if Iran continues launching missiles or threatening regional allies, the United States might respond militarily, but the official line is that Washington does not want a direct war. Though overshadowed by the immediate crisis, the historic backstory is crucial here. For decades, Israel has been widely rumored to possess a clandestine nuclear arsenal. Iran, in contrast, has always claimed that its nuclear program is purely for civilian purposes. The arms race dynamic, plus hostility fed by competing ideological visions, has produced a cycle of mistrust. Now, with actual bombs falling at nuclear research facilities, the stakes could not be higher. One wonders whether diplomatic channels can be resurrected amidst all the devastation. International human rights organizations have swung into action, urging both sides to abide by humanitarian law. They also implore foreign powers to step in and broker a ceasefire. Some non-governmental groups coordinate relief shipments, but these face logistical barriers. Airspace closures, especially on the Israeli side, block many commercial flights, and missile threats hamper ground transport within Iran. Observers worry that if the conflict grinds on, basic necessities, fuel, medical supplies, food, could become depressingly scarce in multiple areas. Ratcheting up concerns, Iran's oil sector, long hammered by sanctions, might be irreversibly damaged if Israel continues to strike refineries. Imagine a scenario where global fuel prices surge in the wake of severe disruptions in Iranian exports. Even critics of Iran's regime are alarmed by the potential global economic turmoil that could ensue. Israeli officials, however, appear ready to accept any short-term repercussions if it means crippling Iran's strategic capabilities. As for the broader Middle East, many eyes are turned toward Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and other nearby states that might be pulled into the drama if hostilities soar. Although few leaders publicly take sides, behind closed doors, negotiations and hush-hush alliances are rumored to flourish. Could Saudi Arabia, faced with Iranian alignment in Yemen, tacitly support Israel's moves to weaken Tehran's influence? Or will regional powers keep a low profile out of fear that they could be the next target in an expanding confrontation? While we do not have a crystal ball, we can tide ourselves over with the small hope that cooler heads might eventually prevail. Diplomacy has not vanished entirely. Some European diplomats cling to the aspiration of restarting negotiations around Iran's nuclear program, possibly bridging the gap between Washington, Tehran, and Jerusalem. But in the middle of daily missile salvos, does anyone have the bandwidth to talk peace? Let us pivot back to the nuclear angle for a moment. The head of the United Nations atomic watchdog, Rafael Grossi, delivered stern words at the Security Council, censuring Iran for certain nuclear activities. In the wake of these devastating strikes, it is unclear whether inspectors can still access key sites to ensure compliance with international standards. Meanwhile, if the Natanz and Isfahan sites have been severely compromised, Iranian scientists may face months, maybe even a year, of painstaking repairs. And if those repairs falter, or if radiation is unexpectedly released, an environmental and humanitarian crisis might pile atop the already staggering toll on both sides. No matter the lens through which we view this moment, geopolitical chess match, ideological rivalry, or a last resort attempt to stop a nuclear meltdown, the data is eye-opening. Yet even as the war drums pound, everyday people bear the brunt of the tragedy. We must remember the communities just trying to survive. Mothers cling to children, unsure if their apartment buildings might be next. Students see their schools suspended indefinitely as families flee to rural areas. Farmers brace themselves for the possible contamination of agricultural land. The ripple effects of this conflict extend in all directions. With that in mind, let us shift to one final angle, the possibility of regime change. Many watchers note that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu publicly hinted that the downfall of Iran's current leadership might be a natural outcome of sustained pressure. But to what extent does this rally ordinary Iranians behind their government, or does it stoke anti-regime sentiment? Meanwhile, inside Israel, critics question whether pursuing such an aggressive strategy might prompt further Iranian retaliation, potentially exposing Israeli civilians to indefinite rocket bombardment. So, we are confronted by an ironic parallel. Each side condemns the other for warmongering, and ordinary people on both sides cower under the horrors unleashed. The coming days will be critical. Will we see either side escalate further, or will international mediators succeed in halting yet another cycle of violence that could spiral into a conflagration engulfing multiple nations? As viewers and readers, we can only watch with anxiety, hoping that bombs recede and diplomacy takes the front seat once again. Just before we wrap up, here is our second friendly invitation. If you find this analysis both gripping and enlightening, consider subscribing to stay tuned for upcoming deep dives into world conflicts and their complex backstories. Your interest fuels our mission to cut through the maya and bring you real insights. We will continue monitoring the tense situation. Regardless of how you feel about the motives and justifications on either side, one reality is painfully clear. Families are being torn apart, children are losing homes, and vital infrastructure lies in tatters. The moral urgency to seek dialogue, to push for a lasting ceasefire, grows with each passing hour. Our goal in this comprehensive report is not just to recount the carnage, but to highlight why it matters to all of us. When tensions escalate in a region as volatile and strategically significant as the Middle East, the aftershocks can reverberate across the entire globe. Thus, hope remains that some flicker of diplomacy can bridge the deep divides. Hope remains that cooler heads might step forward, reining in missile launches and airstrikes for the sake of sparing further bloodshed. The harsh reality stands. The conflict is already in full bloom, and reversing it will demand unprecedented resolve. Yet if history has taught us anything, it is that dialogues, no matter how improbable, have a way of surfacing when the world collectively recognizes it is teetering on the brink. In closing, let us remember the father cradling his injured child in Tehran, the Israeli families mourning lost loved ones in Bat Yam and Tamra, the soldiers patrolling smoldering city blocks, and the men in distant offices pulling strings that decide life or death for thousands. The day could come when we look back at this tumultuous stretch of time as a lesson in how precarious our world can become without concerted diplomatic outreach. For the moment, though, crises rage on, and the ultimate outcome is uncertain. Stay safe, stay informed, and continue following all developments with a critical eye on how events in one part of the world can ripple outward in ways we never imagined.